3 years ago today, Britain left the EU thanks to the corrupt EU referendum of 2016. We were originally scheduled to Brexit in late March 2019, but because then Prime Minister Theresa May didn't have a majority in Parliament and enough MPs knew better, that was pushed back to mid-April and again to late October. Mid-2019, Boris Johnson replaced May as Prime Minister and even prorogued Parliament as part of his bid to get Brexit done, which thankfully was overruled. In October, Brexit was pushed back to late January, so Boris Johnson called a general election. Thanks to corruption, a largely unsuspecting public, and a voting system that's barely changed since the late 19th century, Boris and his Tory party won that election easily with an 80-seat majority. By that point, more of us had learnt how bad Brexit would be and that it would not be the everything you want will be done easily miracle that was promised in 2016. When the exit polls came in on the evening of December 12, 2019, I felt that my life was over. I watched the votes get counted all night and I just kept getting more and more upset. Friday morning, the Tories were declared the winners, making Brexit a certainty, and I had the biggest meltdown ever. My parents were in complete denial that Brexit would be as bad as we knew it would be by that point. They even claimed then Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn to be a really bad person, thanks to how the billionaire press manipulated the minds of most UK residents. They claim a better world is not possible and that people not being able to afford the bare basics of what you need just to survive is the way it is, and that there are an elite group of people better than us. I am sick of this rhetoric. All I am seeing here is a Britain that, even though we're 23 years into the 21st century, is still largely stuck in the 19th century. The far-right politicians occupying Parliament knew Brexit was what they needed to escape how the EU are giving many Europeans a brighter future, so those right-wing scumbag politicians lied to us in order to make Brexit possible. I am not in a position to give you all the details of how this all happened and how we got to where we are now, but all I can say is that every Prime Minister we've had since old dead Margaret Thatcher has deceived the UK public, lied to us over and over, just so they can get rich off us and make poverty and a broken society where nothing works as it should seem normal. By now, it should be obvious to more of the UK that it should not be normal to pay more for your electricity than just about any other country worldwide, have many residents reliant on food banks just to have anything to eat, be charged two-figure amounts, in some cases even three, every month for phone and stroke or internet service, have healthcare waiting lists higher than they were before the coronavirus pandemic, be ruled over by politicians who are allowed to get their food and other things for free while we all have to pay more than ever, be threatened with sacking if we rebel against our bosses, have to pay hundreds a month if we live in supported living, have our children and teenagers go through a school system that treats them like slaves, even making them do homework, which misses the point of having time outside school, be at the mercy of energy, utility and public transport providers who charge us more and more for worse service, and not be aware that we need to shrink our carbon footprint big time. I'm sure there's a lot I missed, but because I have a learning disability, there's only so much I can process at any one time. Jeremy Corbyn who was Labour leader in the latter half of the 2010s, wasn't perfect, but had he won either the 2017 or 2019 general election, he would have given us a national care service, restored our NHS to its pre-Thatcher glory, and taken our internet access into public ownership. Who wouldn't want that? The super rich assholes making money off our suffering. That's why the press did all they can to make Jeremy Corbyn look bad and even pave the way for a Labour leadership contest shortly into 2020. Keir Starmer promised to give us all we wanted, including taking our public services back into public ownership. He got the most votes, was elected, but not long after, went against us and even voted for Boris's Brexit deal at the end of the year, despite saying he was an advocate for rejoining the EU. What a backstabbing scumbag! Shortly before our second lockdown within the last few months of 2020, Starmer even demanded our kids be in school, despite COVID still being a problem. COVID still being a big problem now, and more. Starmer has been selling more of his soul since. He is a Tory in everything but party affiliation. Last year, Boris Johnson knew he was fucked, so he stepped down, but the Prime Minister we got shortly afterwards, Liz Truss, was no better. She wasn't PM for long, but her replacement, Rishi Sunak, could well be our worst Prime Minister ever. Like the fascist fuckers who came before him, Sunak is a liar, doesn't care about our suffering, uses all sorts of fancy words to make things seem less bad than they actually are, distracts from the crises we are faced with by declaring he wants almost all teenagers to keep studying math, and has big plans to punish our striking service workers. Also, don't get me started on the public order bill. More and more, our Tory government are making Britain more and more Dickensian. It has to stop. And as I more recently learned, here in Britain, we had 5 times as many COVID deaths as we did in 2020 and 2021 combined. Also, we are the only major economy worse off now than we were at the start of the pandemic. As it is now, we are paying more for our energy than any other country in the world. Energy companies are forcing more and more of their customers onto prepayment meters. We now have more food banks than McDonald's restaurants, and we have more empty homes than homeless people. For too long, the super rich have gotten away with anything and everything they can. I may not have been born early enough to witness the far more livable Britain that was there in the 1970s, but from what I've been told, things mostly made more sense back then. An NHS that was funded properly, energy and telecommunications in public hands. Tell Sid that's how things need to be again. Since the turn of the century, our government have been allowing private healthcare providers, just like in the United States, to set up shop here in the UK. They claim to us that they are helping the NHS by allowing those with money to spare to reduce that big NHS waiting list. What's actually happening is that NHS hospitals are being made into private hospitals, many A&Es have closed unnecessarily, and the NHS waiting list is now almost double what it was before the pandemic. If those private providers really were helping the NHS, how come they are still around after many years? How come the NHS waiting list is now bigger than it ever was? Oh wait, our government have been lying to us because they want to force on us insurance-based healthcare, which is what the US has had since the 1970s, when Nixon was their president, and bankrupts more than 500,000 Americans every year. Our Tory government don't care about us. They just want to keep getting richer and richer and have more money than they need, even if they could live to be 100,000 years of age. I keep hearing that more and more UK residents are waking up to the Tories' misdeeds, but how fast are y'all waking up? We should have had a 20 million plus mega day of action by now. We can easily force the Tories out of power right now. There needs to be the will, the know-how, the awareness, and anything else you can think of. Just look at what happened in the late 80s and early 90s when old dead Thatcher tried to force a poll tax on us. About 17 million of us fought back and ended Thatcher's time at number 10. I was only 2 years old at the time, but I do want to congratulate those who participated in the anti-poll tax activism. Dead or alive, you all have my respect. I keep getting told that electricity, food and other things we need just to function are going up in price due to inflation, but actually it's corporate greed. The billionaire fat cats use the term inflation to justify corporate greed. They keep lying and lying to us. Also, don't get me started on how newspapers like The Sun, The Mail, The Express, etc. have been lying to many UK residents for generations. I may not be able to cover every little detail of how we got to where we are now. Feel free to fill in the gaps via the comments. But before I tell you the bottom line, I need to discuss an issue with Britain deeply personal to me: the state of education. Because of my learning disability, the only school available to me for most of the 90s was all the way in Whitstable. It was a mainstream school, but it had a separate unit for those with learning disabilities. I don't think things at that unit were too bad. Well, they weren't until I had an unfortunate change of teacher, but I feel that it made no sense that because of something I had no control over, I could not go to school locally. To make matters worse, when it was time for me to begin my secondary education, the only school I could go to for that was all the way in Mepham. That meant that during the week, I was forced to board at one of the 3 boarding houses they had in Gravesend. It was torture. I explain it all in greater detail in a link in the description. Regardless of what I just said, whether your son, daughter, or any other young person you know of has a learning disability or not, our school system is in dire need of an overhaul. Does it make any sense that after your kid can go home, he or she is forced to do homework, which is just schoolwork they're forced to do outside school hours, missing the point of being able to go home after school in the first place? Isn't our school system out of date in that students are made to sit in rows, instructed on what to do by teacher for the vast majority of the day? Does it make any sense that some young people don't have a suitable school near them and are forced to learn far from home and even made to board, missing the point that those with learning disabilities likely don't like being uprooted? Does it make any sense that students are regularly made to sit exams that in many cases are too complex for them and are only an analysis of how well they did on each of those occasions? Wouldn't the young people of today benefit more from an education system that treats them more like humans, gives them more of a chance to express themselves, and lets them learn how to make the most of their lives? There are videos out there on how school systems can be redesigned to give kids a better, freer education and all. I can't explain it fully myself. Many jobs in life cannot be done by just one person. We do still need some literacy and numeracy, and history does need to be taught in greater detail, so we never again have another Trump Brexit or whatever else. But what we do not need is a school system that makes kids and teenagers feel like school is taking over their lives. I am sick of those stupid claims that stuff like homework and school uniforms teach discipline. They are outdated relics from when people didn't know better. It's time to change the system, whether the rich old men making us their bitches allow it or not. Now, for what I think we need to do going forward. The current Tory government have been making our lives more and more difficult for 13 years now. They have lied to us again and again so they can do more and more damage to us. COVID is not over, but they are still going ahead with letting the bodies pile high. They keep making stupid claims of difficult decisions to make their Dickensianism seem nowhere near as bad as it actually is. Our energy bills are higher than ever thanks to the energy fat cats and Ofgem not caring about us, and they are due to get even more expensive in April. We have more food banks now than McDonald's restaurants. The NHS waiting list is now higher than 7 million. Over 900 people a week are dying as a result of the underfunding the Tories are subjecting the NHS to. The private sector are not helping. They're working to make going private the only option, as it is in the United States, where more than 500,000 residents go bankrupt every year as a result. Our buses, our trains, our public transport, our schools, and so many other things are broken beyond belief. Is Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, or was at the time of filming, doing anything about it? No. Is Labour leader Keir Starmer offering us any trace of a better alternative? No. Forcing these right-wing fuckwits out of power is now a matter of life and death. We cannot just sit there and complain anymore. We need to begin planning a day of mega direct action. At any point in the next few months, we need to gather in Parliament Square, 20 million of us. Even more would be even better. We need to be there for weeks on end. We cannot let the current system ruin our lives or the lives of our kids, grandkids, etc. anymore. I can't promise I'll be there myself, being vulnerable, but we need to convince the wider public that things do not have to be as they are now. A brighter future is possible. The government are scared of us more than we are scared of them. They know that enough people rise up and fight back, their game is over. We cannot let any PCSE, public order bill, or whatever else stand in our way. Despite my despair, I have seen signs of things to come. Our postal workers, railway workers, and many healthcare workers have begun strike action last year. More strikes are on the horizon. This needs to be built on. If you are in doubt over whether people ever will rise up and fight back, protests recently took place in China and Iran, two of the most repressive countries in the world. Sure, participants in those protests got arrested, but hopefully more people will feel inspired to join the fight for a brighter future. Here in Britain, we need to, more than ever, make things better than they were pre-Thatcher. Do you feel any better off now than you were in the late 2010s? The mid-2010s? The early 2010s? The mid-2000s? Longer ago? Didn't think so. No more corruption. No more lying. No more broken electoral systems that easily hand power to the wealthy elite. No more school systems that make our kids feel like slaves. No more it is what it is. No more poverty. No more needing to beg. This whole Thatcherite shit show has to end. Bottom line, we need to force the Tories out this year. If we had done so already, we'd be a lot better off now. It is now imperative that we end Tory rule and get Britain back into the EU this year. They always say positive change is impossible until it happens. Let's make it happen. Thank you for your time. Please be part of this fight for a better Britain. Be sure to share this video with as many people as you can, far and wide. Thank you.